right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show for tonight. I am super excited because we have with us tonight middle grade author Alysa Wishingrad, who is the author of the Verdigris Pond. We just went over this. All right. So Alysa once had a different career working in theater, film, and TV, but nothing could be better than building worlds for middle grade readers. When she's not writing, she's probably out walking the dogs or seeing as much theater as she possibly can. Alysa lives in the Hudson Valley of New York with her family, 3 cats, and 2 demanding dogs. The Verdigris Pond is her debut novel, which is so good, guys. I absolutely love it. It's fantastic. So exciting. And I'm so excited to have you here, Alysa.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Marielle, for having me. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. I can't believe it.
Yay! All right. So first off, let's talk about the ins and outs of this awesome book, The Verdigris Pond, which everyone can see is right here. For those that don't know, tell us a little bit about the story and what was the initial spark that sent you off on writing this book.
I'll start with the spark so I don't forget to come back to that. So this story was actually born out of a prompt workshop. The facilitator throws out different prompts and you spend 20 minutes writing and then you read it to each other and, you go on your way. And sometimes prompts just miss you and you just sit there blankly staring at your piece of paper. This prompt was tisk tisk poor little boy. And I heard that and I saw this kid in a manor house on a hill with an old man. And I don't actually even remember what I wrote in those 20 minutes, but I fell in love with this vision. And what was also really interesting was that it sort of unlocked this different voice for me. It unlocked this completely different way of writing. And I took that idea and I went home and I started playing with it. And slowly the story of Bo started to come out of that. So the story of the Verdigris Pond, it's about a young heir named Bo, who is the son of a terribly awful despotic leader of this land. It takes place in a kind of quasi-medieval time period. Bo has been raised like a bird in a gilded cage. He has every privilege available to him, but he is incredibly lonely. He has no friends. He spends his days studying the histories, which are, the tales of his ancestors and their glories and what benevolent and great rulers they are. Once in a while, he can go for a riding lesson with his friend Fledge, who is the stable master. But he's very lonely, and he knows nothing about what goes on beyond the walls of the manor house until the day that he meets Cressy, who is a young servant girl with a very mysterious and hidden talent. Cressy really opens his eyes up to the realities of life in the land, and especially this incredibly awful place right on the other side of the hedgerow called Mastery House, which is the orphanage of your nightmares, where the poor people of the land, of whom are most of the people, have to, in order to pay their taxes, in order to meet their tax burden, they surrender their children to be raised as servants. So Cressy takes Bo there and opens his eyes to the realities of what life is really like for everyone. Bo decides that he has to do something, but he can't just go to his father. His father fairly despises him and sees him as a very weak heir. So Bo teams up with Nate, who's a runaway from this mastery house, and they set off in search of someone who can help. Along the way, they really start to discover that not everyone and everything is what they seem to be, and that power comes from some incredibly surprising places. The 3 kids team up and they try to set things right in the land. Oh, and at the heart of the story is a very chess-like game called Fist, which has been outlawed in the land because it's a game of overthrowing the king. And that plays a very central part in this story as well.
Yes, it does. It's so cool. And we will get to that because we're going to talk more about that because I want to. So kind of a follow-up question. So as booksellers, we're always trying to find the best way to sell books we love to our customers. So how would you sell your book to readers?
I would sell it as a classic, cracking good adventure story. But at the heart of it is a real exploration of privilege and power and justice. And what does it mean to be a responsible citizen in this world? What do we owe to each other? And what do the power structures that rule us, what are they actually doing to us? That's how I would sell it.
That's so cool.
And for chess lovers too, there's this real chess-like game too. So I'd throw that in.
Yes, throw that in. Oh my gosh. So that is awesome. So now let's dive into the fact since this is your debut novel, can you tell me what your experience has been like as a debut author? Were there any parts of the publication process that surprised you? I know, interestingly, right before we started, you mentioned you were a little surprised they let you keep the title.
Well, I am, because, a lot of people look at this title, adults and kids alike. They look at this title and they're not entirely sure how to pronounce verdigris, which you can say verdigris or you can say verdigris, and they're both correct. By the same token, you can look at my name and not know how to pronounce that either. So
I had to ask her how to pronounce it to make sure I didn't pronounce it wrong.
It's all a befuddlement. So what has surprised me is, well, I would have to say the beautiful surprise is, the world of middle grade kid lit online and in real life is just this wonderful supportive environment. Teachers and librarians and other authors and readers. It's just this really wonderful corner of social media that, we don't often think of social media as a warm and welcoming place. But I can tell you that the middle grade market really is this wonderful community. I've made some amazing friends with my fellow debuts, the 20 Wonders, who are just an amazing group of talented authors. And I'll be honest with you, I knew that publishing was a slow boat. It's a very slow boat. But, patience it's a virtue. And Nate doesn't have any, as he says in the book. And I'm working on growing my patience. So,
all right. Oh, and then so because this is your first one, I know you mentioned how you came up with the initial spark for this, but why did you decide to write a middle grade fantasy? Because that's it's a different genre. It's also a specific age group. Was it always your intention to write in the middle grade area?
Once I started writing novels, yes. I started my life as a playwright. I came out of college a playwright. I moved to New York with the intention of being a playwright, but I didn't really have that patience at that age for the rewriting, for the revision, for the real work of writing. And so I sort of took a detour and did some other work, and then quit that other work and started my family. And when I came back to writing, I found I didn't want to write plays. I actually started writing middle grade because a friend of mine and I were pitching a cooking show for kids. And we had this little animated segment that was sort of going to be an exploration of where did it come from? What's the history of salt in 90 seconds? And we didn't wind up selling that show, but I took the germ of that idea and wrote my first novel, which is still in a drawer somewhere. But by that time I was really in love with middle grade. And I think, I don't know, it's just this seminal time period. I may not remember a lot of the facts of my life from when I was 12, but I know that feeling, that moment when you start to realize that the adults around you don't have all the answers, that nobody has all the answers, and that, and it's this real kind of knife's edge moment. And And I love kids that age. And I think it's this magical moment that I want to, if I can help keep some kids grounded on this side of childhood for just a wee bit longer, that would make me really happy.
That is so nice. I will say, I still read a lot of middle grade, and it is wonderful because it sort of takes me back to that time when I was that age, and it's really nice. And I always tell people my brain is still half child, which is why I love being a children's buyer, because that's just where my brain is, and it's actually extremely nice. I do love that. And was like the fantasy part, did you want to write fantasy? I mean, fantasy, I love fantasy, but like, was that?
I think it just, I don't actually have a good answer for that. I didn't set out to write fantasy, but I think that because I wanted to take this sort of historical time period and change it and make my own little world out of it, the fantasy just became, just grew out of that. And now I can't imagine writing anything but this kind of historically based, quasi-historical with fantastical elements.
Yay. I love that. I love historical fantasy and fantasy. It's just so much fun.
So much fun. Yeah.
And also for speaking of your story, so I felt that the Verdigris Pawn is just this awesome example of like the classic quest story, because you got the three kids and they have to go, and they're literally going on a quest. And it's got this like classic element of it, but it's just so good. And when I say classic quest story, guys, my usual example is Dragon Rider by Cornelia Funk. If anyone's ever read that, it's very quest, like there's, it's a group of people, they go off, they have obstacles, then they have to overcome in order to find whatever it is that they're looking for. And that the Verdigris Pawn does that so well. And these kind of stories, they just scream adventure. And that's what this book does. It just is like, oh, it's an adventure. But I've seen like a little bit of a waning in middle grade for a while, because Dragon Rider came out. Oh my God, I think I was still in middle grade at that point for a while. But now I've actually seen a lot more. How did you decide to craft your story like in this way? I love how it's told, because it's like almost in a Dickensian way, where it's like a narrator that is looking over everything, and just like very like read aloud. It lends itself to being read aloud. And why do you think this story works so well for the middle grade age group? Because I think
it's so interesting, because again, this kind of like this writing voice came to me in that prompt, and I'm not trying to make it sound like some mystical, magical thing, but it just sort of started to lock in for me. And clearly the book was not hatched whole, and it took me a while to find my way in that voice. It could be because those are the stories that I retain from my childhood that I loved, the Chronicles of Prydain and all of those just amazing quest books.
Chronicles of Prydain, that's another good one.
Yeah, right? I mean, you start with somebody who doesn't think of themselves as special, right? And they get swept along on this amazing journey. And I don't know, I think that's who we all are, right? And a lot of us, especially when we're kids, we think, well, I'm just some kid, I just live in my house, I just read my books, I just play my video games. I don't have anything special to offer. And I just don't think that that's true. I think we all do. And I think we're all, not to get hyperbolic, but I think we're all capable of being heroes of our own story and serving the greater good.
Alysa, I would say there you are. Your picture went away for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, I got a little funky.
Yeah, but you're back, so that's good.
Okay.
But yes, that's what and then, so like, obviously I've often seen fantasy worlds tend to be the very preferred settings for quest novels. And I feel like a lot of people when they think of a quest novel, they are thinking of like the fantasy world, obviously, because we got Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. Why do you think fantasy is such a good place for like quest stories to live?
I think it's because it allows us to take a step back from the world that outside our window, the world that we see. The truth is the struggles in any of these books, The Lord of the Rings, is really no different than the struggles of our world right this minute. But by taking a step back, in those books, by inserting dragons and inserting hobbits, in my book, there's no fantastical beasts, but taking it a step back and creating a land that never existed, I think it allows us some distance so that it's not hitting us over the head as much. And I think that when we don't get hit over the head with information, we can actually glean and make more connections than when they're handed to us. And I think that's why a lot of quest novels are set in fantastical lands.
Yes, it is true, because it's like you're saying, like most of these stories, none of them are very different from problems we face in reality. But when we put them in a fantasy world, it's almost like it's a safe place to deal with that. Like, just,
yeah.
Aha.
Yeah, and you can draw your own conclusions, and you can make your own connections.
Exactly.
Instead of being, I think that there's great value for realistic fiction. There's incredible value for, not to take away from it at all, but sometimes it's for kids and adults. It's a little bit easier to take a step back so that you can absorb it in a different way.
Yeah, escape for a little while. Get it? Which is
exactly.
Wouldn't we all? So anyway, speaking of your fantasy world, it is so amazing. It is so amazing. It's written so well. I mean, like, it really feels like when I was reading it, I was like inside of the castle. I was like in this medieval world, and it just sprung to life for me, really. And so my thing is, how were you able to craft this world to make it really come alive for readers? And do you have any tips for like a budding fantasy author who's trying to create their own world?
I think for me, very wise, a brilliant writer and a very wise mentor who I had the opportunity to work with, Peter Larangis, said to me, now, don't forget, you have to deal with all of the senses. We have to see this, we have to smell it, we have to hear it, we have to be able to taste this land. And I think that if you can focus, am I going in and out? Am I okay?
I can hear you. You're good.
Okay. If you can focus on those elements, I think that that's what is important to bring a fantasy land to life. But more than that, I know an awful lot about this land that never made it into the book, or that got cut out of it. Because really what's most important is, how does the environment impact the protagonist and what they need and what they want? And so I think sometimes when we're crafting fantasy lands, the impulse is to talk about everything. Mm-hmm. I like to just keep it to the essential bits that impact my characters, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it absolutely. Yeah, you don't want like a ton of exposition, which sometimes is the folly of fantasy worlds, because it's like suddenly you're getting explained. So I always find the better fantasy worlds are the ones like yours that like focus on, this is what the character needs at this moment. This is how it's affecting them.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing of like, since all of your characters live in this world and there's not like, like an interloper from somewhere else, which is often used in fantasy to like explain the world. You do it so well because obviously if they live in this world, they're not going to be talking about how the world works. But right. In a way, Bo is getting, like, he is actually seeing the world for the first time.
That's right. Right.
So it's a very nice, it's a very nice, natural way of doing it. It just seems like, it's just so cool. You just have to read it, guys. You really do. All right. So I'm going to jump a little bit because this might actually do better. So it's kind of a follow-up to that question about your fantasy world, is that So, what kind of research did you have to do in order to create your fantasy world and the people in it? And because a lot of people, they think of fantasy, it's like, oh, well, they just imagine everything. It's like, yeah, and then they have to follow the rules that they never. They can't all of a sudden, so what kind of research did you do? And do you have any recommendations of books or sources for aspiring writers who are looking to craft their own fantasy worlds?
Yeah. So, but let me back up. I want to start with the sort of the fundamental questions that you ask yourself when you're creating a fantasy world. What is the system? What's the government system like? What's the monetary system like? What does the world look like? What's the geography? What food is available? Is there water? Is there trade? What happens with the outside world? How do people organize themselves? Is there religion? What's the dominant culture? What are is there a caste system? Is there what are the people like? Are there different peoples in this land, and what's their relationships to each other? It's sort of very kind of academic kind of breakdown of the world. I forgot the second part of the question. Oh, in terms of research, I did a ton of research, and I love research, and I can go right down those rabbit holes. And it's everything from Google to, I love books so this is A World Lit Only by Fire, which is an amazing book for sort of medieval time periods. This is another great book that I love, The Atlas of Cursed Places, which is fantasy atlases, of some real and some lands from literature. And then books like this is What People Wore, which is just like this catalog of, what did you wear in the 19th century, and what was it called, and what did the different collars look like, and what did the different, ladies' outfits look like, and what did the wealthy wear, and what did the middle class wear, that kind of stuff. I can just sit there and drink that stuff up for days and hours. And I just try and immerse myself in the time period that I'm writing in, and reading other books and watching movies and other interpretations. And then I take a lot of that information, and then, because I'm not a historian, I can borrow from here and I can borrow from there, and then I can use my imagination to mix things up. Yeah.
Which is so cool. That all sounds awesome. I like that kind of research too. It's so fun. All right. So, oh my gosh. So one of the major things in your book is obviously the game of Fist. So let's talk chess, or rather Fist in your book. It's Fist. So it's a central theme in the book. And obviously it's different, but there are parallels between it and chess. I find that really interesting because recently there's been like an uptick in interest from our younger customers in chess. As well as their parents. So it kind of like is a bonding thing. But the interesting thing with this is Fist, instead of bonding Bo and his father, it's almost like it becomes this real life war between them. So despite, yes, there's like fantasy and all this fun, historical medieval stuff, but a lot of it is about this family dynamic between Bo and his dad. And so can you describe that dynamic between them, how it shaped the story, and how you use Fist to give their relationship kind of the form instead of just like
yeah that's a really great question. So himself,
yes,
which is all that people dare call him.
Yes, himself.
Is because he is so terrifying.
I found that enjoyable too. I was like, himself. Oh, that's so cool.
They only dare call him himself. He received the title from his father, who received the title from his father. This family has been ruling this land for a very long time, and what's interesting about himself is he is completely duty bound. He is completely defined by his role, and he is determined to ensure that the line continues, except for he's saddled with an heir who he deems unacceptable, too weak, too sensitive, too thoughtful to take on the role. It's a very interesting dynamic, and I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to go into too many spoilers, but I think that there's one of the themes that I really wanted to explore in this story was what even our families, which we love, we have a way of handing a role to people in our family. Oh, you're the funny one. Oh, you're the serious one. Oh, you're the caretaker. And I think that I would like kids to, or those roles could be even deal with bigger issues. And I want kids to understand that just because you are being told by the people who are raising you or your family or society that this is who you're supposed to be, you're not supposed to be anybody except for who you want to be. And that those elements of your personality that you perceive as flaws are really your strengths and your superpowers. And it takes some time and some gumption sometimes, and sometimes a quest to understand how to use those flaws and what the gift is behind them. So that doesn't really answer your question about Bo and his father, but I think that that's what Bo's journey is about, right? Is taking that role that he's been handed. He's been handed a couple of roles, which is you're supposed to be a worthy heir, but you're useless. And those are big burdens for him, and making them work for him. And yeah.
And it is rather interesting because, like, as you said, in the land, the game Fist has been outlawed, and yet the first scene we see is Bo trying to, well, he's playing himself in Fist, but, like, the idea is that he's trying to play his father and, like, prove that he's worthy.
Right.
So it's almost like this. It's just very interesting as like the first scene we see. So this is going to be a weird question, but I'm actually quite curious because in the game of Fist, the idea is that either the verdigris pawn unseats the king, or the king like takes out the verdigris pawn. So my question is, if you would you rather be the verdigris pawn or the king? Is that a weird question?
Oh, no, it's a great question. And it's an easy answer. I would rather be the pawn. The king is defending his position. The king is doing everything that he can to hold on to power. But it puts him at a disadvantage, I think, strategically. It could put him at a disadvantage because all he can do is defend. Whereas the verdigris pawn, with the help of the mage and the ace and their guards, can play both defense and offense. And I think it's a lot more interesting and a lot more fun to be in that position. It's dangerous. Oh, it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous for all of the pieces, because if one false move and game over and you're done. But I think it's a lot more fun.
I agree. I would totally want to be the pawn, and it's just, I was like, yes, I want to be that, and not just because it has such a cool name.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
good.
Well,
then we can't play with each other because we both be playing attackers.
Find someone who wants to be the king, and then just unseat them. And
but you have to be clever. You can't. It's not that easy. You can't.
Exactly.
You have to use your you have to use your allies. You have to know how to use them, and you also have to be very crafty about it.
So yeah, in case you guys didn't get it, Fist is a very big theme in the story, that when they're actually in the quest. So you'll see a lot of that, which is really cool. For all you chess lovers out there who are like, yes, you'll see it like actually in action, like with real people.
And I will say this, it's not quite ready, but soon I will be unveiling something on my website for all you chess lovers out there.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah.
Yay.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned, guys. All right, so now I want to like take a little more dive into your actual characters, specifically the kids. But himself can stay there. So like Bo and Cressy and Nate and all the kids, they're like these awesome kids, man. I want to be their friend. I want to like, they're so like well written, and they like obviously they're in their circumstances are drastically different from like kids in the world that we live in. But at the same time, they're very real, and I feel like their struggles are very relatable to kids today, even though, you know, we're not all trying to, you know, fight evil and save a kingdom, but in our own way, maybe we are. So my thing is, how were you able to write these kids and have them sound so real, like actual kids? With basically, I mean, like, they don't sound like an adult writing children's characters, even though obviously that's what happened. But so, like, how did you make them sound like, you know, kids?
A lot of work, I think. A lot of revising, and because you don't always know when you're doing that, you know. Sometimes it takes a very brilliant editor to say, sounds like an adult. This sounds like you. But I think also because I come from a theater background, from a playwriting background, I think that helps me to craft dialogue and to get inside the characters' heads and be sparing with my dialogue and direct with my dialogue.
Which is, yeah. I have heard some of my friends who are writers, they do say like acting out certain parts of your story does help you figure out, does it sound okay? Does it sound not weird? Like, does it sound the way that I want that it's supposed to sound?
In the before times, I used to go and write in a coffee shop a lot. And I would sit there like this, reading out loud and talking to myself and just being like the crazy lady mumbling to herself in the corner. What? Constantly.
But so, and then another part that's also really important that I think, and your book does very well too. I just wanted to know, why do you think it's so important for anyone writing for kids to remember to never like talk down to the kids in their stories that you're writing?
Right. Well, does anybody like to be talked down to? I mean, my son, when he was 2 years old, if people approached the stroller and were like, hello, how are you? He wanted nothing to do with it. I don't think that, I think that impulse comes from a complete disregard for how brilliant children are and how much they see and how much they understand and how keyed in they are to the world. And again, especially these middle grade readers, they are watching, they are listening, and they are starting to realize and recognize the hypocrisies that we present, you know, and they're listening and they're watching, and I could never imagine speaking down to my readers. It's this is a collaboration. You know, this is let's sit down and let's tell each other a story. You know, I don't understand that impulse. I think it's the impulse to adults and and people who forget that what it feels like to be a kid and what that moment in life is like.
Which is so true. And like, and also the other thing, the only thing with especially with middle grade authors, these kids, they will tell you exactly what they think. They will like, and they know, again, I've always said, kids are so much smarter than adults. They just are. And they know when they're being talked down to, like they're stupid. And they will tell you exactly what they think of your book. And it's like, it's almost scary. It's like your toughest critic is like that 10-year-old kid right there who's reading it and is like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And they're smart and they're seeing connections and they're making connections to their own lives and the world around them and to other books and to other pieces of media. They're like keyed in. It's the adults who, you know, are sort of like running on auto.
Yeah. That's because kids are so observant because there's still new things. And I think we all need to remember sometimes that there's still new things for us to discover too.
Constantly. Yeah, and I think that's one of the joys of writing for this age group, is because you have to keep your eyes and your mind and your heart open, and remember, how do I want to say this? What it feels like to be at once, a child on the verge of adulthood.
Yeah.
Leaving those childish things behind and trying to hold on to that part of yourself, even as you're maturing.
Exactly. So this is another kind of thing that's always something, so like, that gets brought up, the question of where are the parents, that always gets brought up when you have anything in children's literature, because, in most kids lit, parents are either, they're just not there, or they're just oblivious to everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is, the obvious answer is, of course, that in a book written for kids, the kids have to be the heroes, and parents can kind of gum that up a little. Because, what self-respecting parent is going to go let their kid fight some evil or monster and risk their lives? Like, no one's going to let them do that. But in this, my question in regards to this is why it is so important for kids to be able to see themselves as the hero in these stories that are written for them. And like, how, as a writer, would you want to instill that idea of being a hero, even if they're not necessarily fighting evil, in kids through books?
Well, again, I think this sort of goes back to that idea that kids at this age are starting to realize that their parents and that their caregivers and that their teachers and their mentors and the adults around them are flawed, and they don't have all the answers, and they cannot protect you from every evil that comes along. They can't protect you when a pandemic hits. They just can't. They can, but they can't. They can. You can all go home and be safe, but there are things in this world that your parents do not know and cannot do. And so I think in a lot of ways, when the parents in middle grade novels are always dead or missing or irresponsible or horrible as they are in this, or having to surrender their kids, it's because it's a stand-in for the fact that at this age, you have to realize that you have to start to understand the world yourself. Nobody else can do it for you. Nobody else can actually explain and answer all of the questions you have, because some of them are unanswerable. What was the second half of that question?
Sorry, yes. So, like, as a writer, I just wanted to know how you would want to instill this idea that, as a kid, you can be like a hero in your own life, in your books. It's like your book, I love, because again, it's a lot of like, no one is what they seem. Like, Bo thinks he's useless, but it's kind of like almost more of a self-confidence booster, even though obviously he's trying to save a kingdom. It's very important. But like, so how would you want to like kind of instill more of that in like books, like in kids with books, I guess?
Well, I guess in this book and something else that I'm working on, it's that feeling of helplessness. It's a bit absurd with Bo. He on the outside, he appears to have everything that he could ever need, right? He has every creature comfort in the world, yet he perceives himself as he has every privilege that anybody in this land could want, and yet he perceives himself as the poor tisk poor little boy. He perceives himself as somebody without any power. And he doesn't really have power, because his father would sooner squash him than listen to him. But I think what Bo and Nate and Cressy, they all stand in for this idea that, again, going back to that idea of your flaws, that you may think that you're just some kid sitting in your house, and what can you do for all these problems in the world? And the truth is you can stand up and you can use your voice, and you can lend a hand to somebody who's fallen down and help them get up. And that in itself is an incredible act of bravery and kindness, and it's very important to the world. I think we all have to understand that we can all play a part in making things better for everyone. And that we don't have to feel helpless, and we don't have to feel disenfranchised and or helpless to do anything. That even those simple acts have great meaning.
Which is just so wonderful. And actually, I just got a little thing from Drew. So apparently there are some people who are watching right now who are commenting about how much they just love your book. And I just wanted to let those people know that you can, if you want to ask questions, your own questions of Alysa, just type them into the live stream and we will ask her. So yeah, so just wanted to put that out there and let you know that people love your book, because they should.
Appreciate it.
So while we're waiting on that, I just have a little follow-up question to that. It's sort of probably along the same lines, but I personally have always asserted that fiction is the best way to help kids work out their problems, learn about tough topics, and find the words to explain to the adults in their lives how they're feeling. Because, they feel stuff, but they might not have like the words to describe it, but fiction can help them do that. Would you agree with this statement? And how do you think the verdigris pawn could help kids find, their way?
I absolutely agree with that statement. And I think that that's one of the most important things that, books, the role that books play in the lives of kids, aside from great entertainment and immersing themselves in other lives, and through that immersion, realizing that not everybody's life looks like yours, and it builds empathy and it builds an understanding of our place in the world. Again, forgot the second half of that question.
It's just how do you think the verdigris pawn could help kids find their way? We about it already, so
yeah, I think I've kind of answered it.
Yeah.
I just hope that it gives somebody, the a little bit of a push to stand up for what's right, to stand up and say, this is not right and we need to do something about it. And even if that is going to an adult and saying, this situation is wrong, we need to change it.
That is okay. So Anne Ursu is asking, she says, hi, and could you talk about your revision process for this book, and how different is the story from the story you started with?
Oh, Anne Ursu knows the answer to this question. I have to tell you that I had the amazing honor and pleasure of working with Anne Ursu and Laura Ruby at the Highlights Foundation on this book for 2 different workshops. They lead an amazing workshop called Writing the Unreal. They're goddesses. They're just brilliant goddesses.
I am for you, Alysa, but I just need to say I gush over Anne Ursu too. I love all her books.
Her new book, Dangerous Girls of Dragomir Academy. Mm-hmm. Oh my God!
I got an arc of that. I was so excited.
It's mind blowing. It's amazing. It's just amazing. Just everybody go buy it like yesterday. It's out in October, right? Yeah. Just go buy it right now and it'll drop on your door. But so my revision process, as Anne knows, was very, very long and required a lot of iterations of this story. I think Beau's journey has always been the same. The land, it's grown, but it's always been the same. How the story developed is very different. How it played out. Endless revisions of this story. Countless revisions of the story, capped off by, after I sold it to my mind-blowingly brilliant editors, Tony Marquette and Megan Ilnitsky, we were talking about some fundamental changes that they wanted to see in the story. And I realized the only way I could do this was to white page the novel, throw the whole thing out, throw it over my shoulder, and start again from a blank page, which at the time terrified me to the core. But as soon as I started going with it, I realized it was the only way to serve this story and to rebuild it the proper way. So I would say I probably revised this book about 10,000 times. And, but it was that white page, which again, it didn't come out perfect. It came out far from perfect, but it laid the groundwork in a much better, much smarter way. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without those 10,000 other iterations where I was really getting to know my characters and my world. I will tell you, it took me a really, really long time to get to know Beau. And I think it was because I had envisioned him initially as, as the sheltered kid, right? And so I wasn't imbuing him with enough of an inner life. And it took me a long time, and I had to really get very honest and dig very deep personally in order to bring Beau to life on the page.
Oh, that is, and she actually, and just to your answer, she said that work really shows. So yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah. And it's interesting because, again, I told you when I was in my 20s and I came out of school and I was a playwright, that was the thing that I wasn't capable of, was digging, I'd sort of like take something and be like, look what I did. And
yes.
somebody would be like, that's good. But, I wasn't personally mature enough to like know what to do with that but, mm-hmm. And what does revising mean? And I learned an awful lot about revising is not about cleaning things up. It's not about making your pretty sentences work better or surrounding a pretty sentence with other pretty sentences. It's really about digging deep and finding the truth of the story.
That is so cool. So we do have another question from the audience, from Kate Albus. So she's wondering if you can talk a little bit about the cover of your book. She says it's absolutely stunning.
Thank you for saying that, Kate Albus. The cover is stunning. The art director is Laura Mock. And the art is by Julia Sarda, who is, just go to her website like now. She's brilliantly talented. And I'm so fortunate. And I can't believe that this is the cover. It's just so special. And I feel like somebody said, it's very simple, but there is so much detail and there's just so much energy coming from these three faces.
It really is. I love the cover. I think it's fantastic. I love the color of the cover. I love that it's green. It's all, and the little pond. So cool.
Mm-hmm. And that little look from Cressy just says, oh my God, it just screams worlds. It's
exactly.
So evocative.
And like, it might be simple, but honestly, simple covers are the best because you don't want to you want it to be like just giving you a hint of what's inside.
It's such an invitation, right? And that it's all in the pawn. It just pulls you in and just says, come here, my child. Let me tell you a story.
Exactly. That's exactly what it says. Yeah. I love when they're nice covers because it's so much easier to sell them because it really is so much easier because, as I say a lot, the whole don't judge a book by its cover saying is true for everything except books. People absolutely judge books by their cover.
Well, they do. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So we actually have another question as well. Shakira Born. You're stealing my question a little bit there, Shakira. I'd love to know what you're working on next. So one of my later questions is always, is there anything next you're working on that you can, would like to share with us? And then she wonders if the process is any different from writing The Verdigris Pawn.
The process is a little bit faster, I think. I think I was still really, I think you're always learning how to write a novel. Anytime you write a novel, this is what I understand from people who are much smarter and have been doing this much longer than I have, that every novel is going to be different and you're constantly learning how to do it. But I think, I'm less of a pantser. I'm so much more of a planner now. I'm not a graph person. Graphs scare me. But I sit down and I handwrite and I tell myself the story of the story. And even if that changes when I go to write, at least I have a real roadmap. so the process has gotten a little bit faster. I am not a fast writer, though. The next book that I'm working on, I can just tell you a teeny little bit about it. I think it also takes place in a quasi-historical time period. This one is something that looks like 1910. It starts on an island that kind of could be like a Mackinac Island, or there's a little island in Ohio called Put-in-Bay. And then it moves to a highly industrialized city. It's the story of a girl who is trying to unlock the mystery surrounding her father's death. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the island that she grew up on, and the monsters that lore tells us once roamed this island.
Ooh. And
I'm going to tell you.
And it's middle grade. Is it middle grade?
It's also upper middle grade. Yeah. I don't imagine leaving this sort of upper middle grade terrain for a very long time. I might write something that's a little bit younger, but this is very much my happy place.
Well, and that shows too. I always, whenever a writer is happy when they're writing the book, like they're happy about the writing, it really shows through when you read it. And it's so nice and makes you smile.
It's so nice. Yeah. Yeah. I love that book.
All right. So now I'm going to get into these are back to some of my questions. It looks like right now we've stopped with the incoming ones, but there could be more. So my question now is we come to book recommendations, which is always my favorite part. So fantasy, whether you're talking middle grade, YA, or adult, or anything, it always attracts really voracious readers, and sorry guys, Drew is our store owner. Okay. So one little tech thing here, Alyssa, Drew is asking if you can mute yourself when you're not talking, because apparently there's an echo. Sorry about that, guys. Little tech thing. That's what we do when we get live shows. It's awesome. Yes, much better. Awesome. So great. So back to what I was saying now. So fantasy, and we get some very voracious readers, especially honestly middle grade ones. I'm always getting requests for recommendations from parents or even the kids themselves who come up and they've just blown through one book or one series and now they want more. And so my question is, do you have any recommendations for people after they've blown through the verdigris pond, as they will?
I do. Well, there's a marvelous brand new fantasy called Josephine Against the Sea by Shakira Born. Did you read it?
That name, that's why I know that name. I love that book. Oh,
isn't it amazing?
Hello, I love that book.
It's so good. It's so funny. It's so smart, and it's just so wonderful. And I love that book. And I would hand that to somebody. The Ghost and the Girl is a book that I love. It came out last year by Hannah Alkef. I love that book. I would hand them anything by Heather Kasner, who just writes these incredibly, wonderfully dark and intricate and beautiful worlds. There's a book coming out in September called The Wolf's Curse by Jessica Vitalis that I would hand them. I can keep going if you would like, or I can just keep going and going and going.
Oh my gosh. So, Alyssa, you basically just rattled off a bunch of books that I love. And even The Wolf's Curse, I have read that because I have an arc of it. And it is fantastic.
It's so good. Oh, I'm so glad you read it. It's so
amazing. And really, the reason I picked it up was because it had wolf in the title. because I love wolves. But I was so glad I picked it up, and I was like, this is so awesome. Oh man, I'm so excited. All those things are like, oh my gosh, I could just, so if we would want to go on to a little more book stuff. So we do have a section in the store. It's similar to what I asked you. It's called Department 22, or if you like this, then try that. So what books would you want to see on the shelf alongside yours for that?
Well, I think that it would make sense to have The False Prince there by Jennifer Nielsen, right? I think it's a very similar feel. Just because this is one of my favorite books ever, The Lie Tree by Frances Harding. If you've never read The Lie Tree, I just love that book. The Mad Wolf's Daughter by Diana Magras is another one that I would absolutely love to see on that shelf. And I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I think if you're a fan of Diana Wynne Jones, then this book would appeal to you as well. Dare I say that?
I totally agree with you on the Diana Wynne Jones. I think it's perfect. Really. It's so good. And wow. Hello. So we have even more people from so Shakira is really excited and she says, thank you. My guess is because we both love her book and really just thank you for writing it. Jessica Vitalis is also here. She says, hi. And then we have Yvette Clark. She was wondering if you would consider setting another book in the same world as the Verdigris Pawn because she's a huge Cressy fan.
I love Cressy. I love Cressy so much. She, if I could have given her far more chapters, I would have. She's brilliant. She's smart. She's resourceful. I love her. I would absolutely consider placing another book in this land. What interests me a little bit more than like picking up where Beau and Cressy went at the end of this book, we don't want to say, is maybe jumping back a generation or two to see how the land became what it was in Beau's time, or jumping forward a generation or two to like Cressy's granddaughter and see where the land develops and what happens in the land a little bit later.
I think,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, all I was going to say was I'm not against picking up Beau and Cressy and Nate's story. I love them so much, but as a writer, sort of exploring again what happens in the land a little bit before or after is what really piques my interest.
I would read all of those books, Alyssa, any of them. I would so much love to see all of that stuff. All right, guys. So everyone who's listening, who's been so wonderful in putting out their questions to Alyssa, I just want to let you know we are coming to wrapping up our event tonight. So if you have any more questions you want to ask, please get them in. So my last question for you, Alyssa, is what is one of the most recent books you've read and enjoyed? And then also, because you're a middle grade author, I am wondering what was your favorite book as a middle grader in that 9 to 12 age group?
Well, my favorite book as a middle grader was, I told you I'm going to forget things. I just the title of this book just completely flew out of my head, and I'm so incredibly embarrassed.
Don't be
So we're going to come back to that. One of my most recent reads was Maya and the Return of the Godlings, which is the second book in the Maya series by Rena Barron, which is this wonderful fantasy series that sort of takes place in modern day Chicago, but also explores the world of the Orishas. It's a great fantasy series. So that's my most recent, but I have read, so many gorgeous, amazing middle grade books this year. And Yvette Clark has this amazing, gorgeous book called Glitter Gets Everywhere, which is a contemporary realistic, and Marielle's like, that's why I know her name. Which it just deals with grief and moving on from grief in just such a beautiful and tender and very funny manner. Okay. Marielle, I'm so embarrassed. What is the name of the book with the watchdog? Oh my God, The Phantom Tollbooth. Thank you, Alyssa. The Phantom Tollbooth was hands down my favorite book as a middle grade reader. I also loved The Borrowers. I could just get lost in those books for hours on end, and imagine that I lived in the walls of my house.
That is so awesome, Alyssa. Oh my gosh. So I am out of questions. However, I will give, if anyone else has any, please put them in now and we'll get them asked to Alyssa. However, before we really wrap up here, I have to do a little plug for the store, guys. So we have copies of the Verdigris Pawn at the Town Book Center. They are on display. You can buy them in the store. You can buy them online. You can call us, and we'll get it to you, because it is an amazing book and it is wonderful. And Alysa was nice enough to send us some fun goodies that come with the purchase of the book. This little sticker. We have a bookmark, which is also a pawn. And then we also have Alysa signed book plates for us. So you can get a signed book plate with the book, along with all these very fun things. These ones are mine, guys. But you can get your own if you come in and buy the book. So please do. It is an absolute joy to read. It really is. It's so much fun. And you will absolutely love it.
Thank you, Marielle.
You're welcome. Oh, and it's so true, though. So it doesn't look... is there... Oh, wait. Is he doing... There might be another one? Nope. All right. Okay. So that is it for tonight. For everyone that was here, for all of these amazing authors that you apparently know, Alysa. And now I'm like super jealous, because you know that all of their books are fantastic.
Amazing.
But thank you guys so much for tuning in and being part of the discussion. It was really great. Have a nice night, everybody.
Thank you so much. It was so nice chatting with you, Marielle. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Support the Town Bookshop. They're amazing.
Yay. Thank you so much, Alysa. Bye, everybody.
Bye.